Hello everyone, this is ICBs here and today we are going to be talking about Five Nights at Freddy's. So if you're watching this video on a reel by any chance, you should watch the full video on my channel. With that out of the way, let's talk about this movie. And this movie came out a month ago, so if anyone still cares about this movie, let's give this video a go. So when it comes to the story with this movie, they did change quite a lot of things. They introduced a lot of new characters for this movie, which I would say were a nice addition. Were they as good as the original characters from the game or the lore of the game? No, but they were still nice enough. I do really like the main character Mike a lot. I do love how they have written his character, how he has to struggle to keep his jobs and he has to struggle to keep the custody of his little sister from their evil aunt, which is a bit comical, but yeah, they did do that in the movie. So the story of this movie kind of feels like the origins of the franchise, or maybe the origins of the story, because you get to see, spoilers, the origin of Springtrap towards the end of the movie. So I do think that this movie would have benefited a lot if this movie was set a long time after the origins of the Springtrap, so that we could have seen that happen in the flashbacks. So we had, like little pieces of the puzzles to figure that thing out, but we already know that from the lore of the game. But it would have been nice if this movie tried to do this thing again, but for people who are not familiar with the franchise. So yeah, I do think that showing the origins of Springtrap was not really that great. I think it was a bit goofy at times, because when William Afton, I think that's his name, William Afton, right? When he comes out and takes off his head mask thing and then he shows his face, that was so cringy. Like I just kind of I almost wanted to laugh, because this movie went from scary to really goofy looking, because now you're seeing a grown-ass man in a furry costume trying to look intimidating, and he has a really deep voice to make him sound more villainous, but he is wearing a furry costume, so you can imagine how that looks like. Yeah, sorry for the spoilers, but yeah, this video is not going to be spoiler free at all, so watch this video at your own risk. So yeah, I was really surprised to see that this movie didn't really had any jump scares whatsoever. There were a couple of jump scares with, I think, Foxy, they worked really well, and then there were some really cringy jump scares with the balloon boy that were mostly used for comedic purposes. But yeah, like when you hear that Five Nights at Freddy's is going to get a movie franchise, what do you think is going to happen in that movie? You would assume a lot of jump scares, and usually I absolutely hate jump scares in horror movies. I think they're lazy as hell, but for this movie, like, man, you needed those jump scares. Like, that's the whole shtick, right? That's the whole shtick of the games, so you needed that, but somehow they decided to ditch that, and I think it really worked in the detriment of this movie. And another thing that I have to talk about this movie is the lack of horror in this movie in general. There was a point in this movie that the main character Mike and his younger sister and a random police officer, they go to Freddy's pizzeria, and they were building camps from the sheets and the chairs with the animatronics that are supposed to be scary, but now they look really childish and goofy, and it was just a really goofy scene, because you've seen these machines skill and now they're building pillow forts with a child. So it was really weird, because this is supposed to be a horror movie. I know that all of the games might have a different vibe to them, but I think this really takes you out of the movie, because at one point this movie is being horror, and then at the next point you're building pillow forts with a kid. So yeah, and speaking of lack of horrors, I do think that this movie should have been rated hard, or like you needed some blood and gore in this movie. In fact, when I was watching this movie, I didn't realize that this movie was PG-13. I just assumed that it was R-rated and they just decided not to do a lot of gore, but then I later learned that this movie was PG-13, which is surprising, because they do quite a good job of showing the horror and the violence in this movie by avoiding showing a lot of blood, which was really nice and creative. I just wish that they did more of that. Like you could have done that. You've already done it while being PG-13. There was a scene in this movie where an animatronic kills a girl, where he pulls the girl into its mouth and then bites, and then half of the girl falls down from the waist, which was a really brutal scene if you ask me, and I wish that this movie did more of that. And another thing that I wish that this movie did more of was focus on the lore of the Five Nights at Freddy's. And if you watched my video up until this point, you might assume that I don't like this movie, which is not the case at all. I do like this movie. I think there are some great parts in this movie. Like, I do love the look of animatronics. They absolutely nailed it. They look really good. But at some points the movie does get a bit cringe. I do think that the story and the characters were really nice. The animatronics were nice. The movie could have used some more jump scares. So yeah, some of the things that I think that this movie could have used and used less of. But then again, I do think that it comes down to everyone's personal taste in movies. You know, it's like drinking tea. Some people like sugar in it, some people don't like sugar in it. And if I want my Five Nights at Freddy's, I would love my Five Nights at Freddy's to be sprinkled with a lot of horror and lore with it. So yeah, that's my personal taste. And I was looking at the Wikipedia, and it was interesting to see that this movie had a budget of only $20 million, and this movie made about $292 million so far, which is absolutely amazing. So this movie is doing really great financially, so I'm really happy for that. Again, this movie is good. I wish that it had done some things right, but yeah, overall I would say it was a really nice positive experience for me. But let me know what you guys think about this movie. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, it's time for a goodbye.